Action in the scratch race. Slightly misleading title, given that the qualifying rounds are raced over 7.5 kilometres to qualify for the final distance of 15 kilometres this evening in the medal race. This is Heat 2, though. And these are the riders. We've got a representative from Barbados. First time we've seen a Barbadian rider on the track in Jamal Eastwood. A couple of Canadians that we've seen in action. Ethan Vernon and Matt Walls, both very, very fast for England. And Red Waters representing Grenada. India with one rider, Vishavjit Singh. And the Isle of Man's Matt Bostock is definitely one to watch. He is the newly crowned British Criterium champion. A couple of Scots as well, John Archibald, who we saw in action in the individual pursuit, and Carl Gordon too. Will Roberts representing Wales and George Jackson of New Zealand. So 13 starters and just confirmation that 3 will be eliminated. Very interesting to see how Matt Bostock goes. Canada with 2 riders. There he is, Matt Bostock. He's had a busy racing programme on the domestic scene recently, but he's really fast. And on the track, in the scratch race this evening, assuming he does qualify, Matt Bostock would be one of the favourites for the medal. A medal of some description. He's a very, very talented rider, Matt Bostock.
Indeed he is. He's got that balance of a very good sprint, but also to ride very, very fast for those short periods of time.
Well, that is Jamal Eastman of Barbados, who you're looking at there. And the first time we've seen a Barbadian rider in action here at the Commonwealth Games in the track programme. Big moment for him. And Grenada are represented too on the track by Red Walters. Well, let's hope we don't have any of the drama that we had in the first scratch race when Stephen Bell, the rider from Seychelles, somehow managed to contrive to ride into the wheels of the man in front of him just as they were rolling through before the start of the race. There's John Archibald from Team Scotland. Will Roberts from Wales. Between them, one of the riders from Canada. Ethan Vernon rides on the road for one of the biggest teams in the world in Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl. One of 2 riders representing England. Matt Walls as well, he's a World Tour rider on the road with Border Hansgrohe. Taking some notable victories on the road as well with Matt Walls. Off they go then, getting themselves up to speed, getting themselves in line, and when the gun goes, then we will start the scratch race. There'll be 30 laps, 7.5 kilometres of distance. 3 riders will be eliminated. If the main bunch laps a rider, they are shown the red flag and they have to depart the track, and they will not finish the race. They will be eliminated from further qualification, assuming that they are amongst the first 3 to go. 10 riders progress into the next round, the last round, the medal race. Well, it was a very controlled scratch race in the first heat. I wonder if we'll see any of these teams, riders trying to actually attack, or whether it will just be an attritional affair in the hope that the weaker riders in this bunch will be shelled out of the back.
Sometimes we'll often see in the heats that one rider might want to have a big hit out or flying lap. And the last heat we didn't see any of that, was very controlled.
Bostock of the Isle of Man. The hurly-burly of the scratch race won't faze Matt Bostock, the reigning Criterium champion. That's a pretty hectic affair, a Criterium race. And that's his bread and butter as well, Matt Bostock, racing on the domestic scene in the United Kingdom, where a lot of the racing is in short, sharp city centre circuits. And he's been winning for fun this year.
You can see with Bostock there, when he was sat at the back of the bunch and he was letting certain riders in front of him and then picking the rider he wanted to sit on, one of the England riders. So he's obviously got his eye on a couple of riders already and just trying to make sure he stays near those particular riders in this race.
Very moderate pace at the moment through the first 5 laps. Bostock working his way up alongside Kyle Gordon of Scotland. The 2 Scottish riders there side by side, John Archibald and Kyle Gordon. He's just going up a notch now as Ethan Vernon goes to the front from England. And over to the aforementioned Matt Bostock. Jamal Eastman will do a turn on the front in the yellow jersey fairly soon. There he is, of Barbados.
Riders very content to just keep rolling around and having a look at their opposition and their components.
That's really cagey, isn't it, at the moment? Let's not forget, 3 riders are going home. They won't qualify here. There is the Barbadian rider, Jamal Eastman, alongside Will Roberts of Canada. The sole representative of New Zealand is George Jackson. First time we've seen him in action here in London on the boards. The mustachioed figure, very tall figure in the black of New Zealand. Will Roberts, the Welsh rider with the white helmet and red kit. There he is, long flax and locks. But do not underestimate any of the New Zealand riders. Well, a third of the race distance has gone. We've got 20 laps to go. 3 minutes of racing has expired. It's going to get faster, but at the moment, all the riders are perfectly able to live with the pace that the bunch is rolling around this track at the moment. So none of these riders in any visible signs of difficulty just yet.
See Bostock there just coming off the front of the bunch, and he seems to have attached himself to Ethan Vernon for the entirety of this race. So he obviously thinks that Vernon is the right rider to follow for getting through this qualification round.
Well, Ethan Vernon is used to having a rider from the Isle of Man on his wheel. The UAE Tour earlier this year on the road, he was one of the lead-out man for a certain Mark Cavendish, who's from the Isle of Man. They're teammates at Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl. But there is Bostock, and you're right, Bunny, he's playing a very tactical game at the back of the bunch, isn't he? He's not there because he's weak. He's there because he's watching.
Indeed, yeah, he's keeping an eye on everything from there, and I would expect him to keep swinging up again until one of these England riders comes back through again. We'll see what happens, but very interesting to see how he's riding this race at the moment.
Drifting around his third from back now. John Archibald is the back marker from Scotland. Kyle Gordon a little bit further towards the front as Australia take it up.
Yeah, I think a lot of these riders may have been told by their coaches just to get out there and make sure the bike feels okay and the body feels okay. And look, take a look at your competition out there, see how they're all feeling. I mean, they will have poker face on no matter what during the heat here. But one of the big things is just to stay safe, ensure that you go through to the final. As we say, there's still 13 riders there, 3 will miss out.
Josh Duffy is the Australian rider who's just done a turn on the front, and Red Walters from Grenada also just going through and off at the front. Kyle Gordon finds himself on the front. Here is Ethan Hayter, and almost inevitably, not far behind, is Matt Bostock, who's actually picked the wheel of the other England rider now, Matt Walls. There's Will Roberts at the back from Wales. 13 laps to go. Someone is going to start riding soon. One of these teams is going to start to turn up the gas, because that is the way to dislodge the weaker riders and make sure of the safe passage. And it is strange, isn't it? A qualifying race where 10 go through and 3 go out. It changes the tactics of the way it's raced entirely.
The riders will sometimes follow other riders to check their cadence, their pedal revolutions against the rider in front of them to see what gears they're riding. However, I assume that the riders would choose different gears for this evening's final than they would be riding in the heat.
Bostock up high on the banking, just dropping with Derek G of Canada, one of 2 Canadian riders down to the back of the bunch. And where is that red jersey of Matt Bostock? Second from the back there, where Will Roberts is the other rider with a white helmet and the red kit. Singh from India, big figure, quite powerful looking. The two Canadian riders now, Mathias and Guillemette and Derek G. That's G on the front there with the red helmet, Guillemette with the white helmet. And it's getting cagier, if anything, with 9 laps to go, as Will Roberts moves to the front now from Wales, but still with no great intention of just doing anything other than gently rolling through and off.
No, I'm really surprised. I think all the races we've had at the track cycling so far, these 2 qualification races have been the biggest surprises. They haven't been that fast at all. They've been very cagey, like you say, Ned.
But the more established nations, surely the tactic is to try and put the less established nations and the lower ranked riders under pressure and get it done before taking the risk of taking any of these riders to the line.
Absolutely, yeah. Why risk it? Why risk it? I mean, look at them, they're all above the blue line at the moment, which is unheard of in a race like this.
Yeah, it's a relatively dangerous position to be in for some of the riders that just want to stay safe.
I think Bostock has realised the slight jeopardy there. There's just that little turn he did there has got the crowd to react. And as England hit the front with Matt Walls, maybe it's about to change. But not much evidence of it as George Jackson looks round from New Zealand. And Duffy doesn't seem to want to work too hard. Flicks an elbow from Australia. And they're still all tightly bunched with 6 laps to go. So just a reminder, the last 3 riders over the line, I mean, no one's going to get lapped now. The last 3 riders over the line, and whatever bunch comes to the line are out.
Just see that little bit of contact between Bostock and the Australian rider there. They're trying to fight for position at the moment. You just see Bostock gesture with his hand towards the Australian down the home straight.
Vernon and Bostock on the front now. England and the Isle of Man. Will Roberts on his wheel and then Duffy. And now it does start to get a little bit faster. Now there is an increase in pace and there's an attack. And it's come from Mathias Guillemette of Canada. Trying to get clear and get out of the chaos. Ethan Vernon chasing him down with Matt Bostock on his wheel and Will Roberts, and Canada have suddenly switched the tactics entirely. Now, look at the back of the bunch. That's just as important as the front. Who's under pressure? You can see now the Indian rider Singh is under pressure and the Canadian teammate as well. G, he too is facing a bit of a battle to hold the wheel of the Scot in front of him. John Archibald. Actually, it's a big crash. Multiple riders going down now. Horrible crash. Half the field is down. The race has stopped. The rider actually went over the banking and into the crowd, into the seating, into the spectators there. Shocking crash again on the same banking as we saw yesterday, involving many more riders though. Matt Bostock is down, other riders picking themselves up. The Barbadian rider I can see there, Jamal Eastman is all right. Bostock is down. And that was a major incident, and there will be a big delay here. And as I say, a rider was catapulted into the crowd.
Just seen one of the staff members successfully run up the track, which is not an easy thing to do, but wants to get to his rider who is in the crowd as soon as he can. There's already some volunteer staff there with the rider. Hopefully none of the spectators have been injured.
Well, down on the track as well, aside from that, there are riders being treated, and I think Matt Bostock is one of them. Down on the track there, you can see his legs there, his black shorts. He's the only rider who's still down. George Jackson is picking himself up there from New Zealand. So Bostock and one other rider receiving treatment up in the stands. Well, I've never seen a crash like that.
No, actually, the first time that I've witnessed two riders, two bikes go over the top of the banking in one of the steepest parts of the banking into the spectators.
Well, we think one of the English pair of Matt Walls and Ethan Vernon might have been one of the riders to go over the top.
It was Matt Walls. It was Matt Walls who went over the top. You can tell the different bikes that Vernon and Walls are on. It's Walls' bike that's on the outside of the track at the moment.
Well, the competition will clearly be delayed. That goes without saying. There's a stunned silence here in the velodrome. Bonnie, I wonder whether the way that race was raced and suddenly exploded into action, at least in part, contributed to the drama of that crash, because it had been such a pedestrian pace to that point and suddenly it lit up.
Absolutely, yeah. That was my one concern with a race like that. So you suddenly, as soon as you get an injection of pace so close to the finish, there are still so many riders who haven't used up a huge amount of energy in that race at all. So everyone is sprinting for that final lap. And you don't usually get that in a track race. So it's very unusual to see, and it's not that we were expecting a crash, but the likelihood of it happening is there. And that's the problem with a slow speed race. You have so many riders in with a chance of winning that sprint at the end.
Well, paramedics are arriving on the scene. The injured parties up in the stands are being seen to the best of their ability. Matt Bostock is being stretchered off on the track now. You can see the spectators there can see what's happening to the Isle of Man's Matt Bostock, who's out of the race. Hugely disappointing. Terrible for Matt Bostock, falling victim to that, but ongoing concern with two riders and potentially some of the spectators as well being treated up in the stands. This is Matt Bostock from the Isle of Man. He was looking so good as well, so confident, and would have had huge ambitions at these Commonwealth Games, but they have come to a sorry end indeed. In 2 days, the second crash of great significance. One of the Canadian riders as well here bearing the scars. He went up the barrier, didn't actually go over the barriers as happened to a couple of the other riders, but he was involved heavily in that accident. It looked like he was holding his right wrist there as well, and it doesn't look like a rider, obviously, who will be able to continue with these games.
Well, it was just that desperation that came so quickly with a bell lap, wasn't it? They were riding around quite pedestrian for most of the race, and then all of a sudden they realised, well, hang on, we're still 13 here and we can't afford to be in the last 3. And it's also very unusual to see riders, say 6 or 7 wide on the track with 1 lap to go. Yeah,
it is absolutely right. You're usually lined out by that point, aren't you, with no more than kind of 2 riders abreast. And I think that was the main difference there. Like you say, Rochelle, there were 5, 6 riders all over the track, and I think it was a touch of wheels between the rider from Barbados and Matt Walls, and then everyone else came down as well.
And that was always the risk, wasn't it, of not controlling the pace and actually keeping it all a little bit more strung out. And we saw the teams in the first heat do exactly that, just to protect the riders, make sure that the whole race was safe, and it was safe. Very different in this heat, and it's not the only contributing factor, obviously, but it did play a part in that crash.
No, absolutely. There was a different approach to that first heat. They actually went fairly hard for those first 6, 8 laps, and that just did enough damage to the riders in the group. And then he picked up the pace at the end, which caused all the riders to kind of disappear. They needed to get out of that group so they could be in the first 10 riders. And then the second one, like you say, Ned and Rochelle, the pace of the whole race was so slow. There was never an injection of pace that caused riders any difficulty at all.
With all your track experience, both of you, down many years, have you ever seen a rider go over into the crowd, over the stand like that? And especially not at the top of the banking.
No, never seen that in all my... I know it has happened at previous tracks, but I've never seen it live happen. And obviously the doctors and medics are on hand immediately assisting Walls at the moment.
And the spectators there that were sitting so close to the banking. It's something you don't imagine ever happening, to be honest, in the depth of the deepest part of the banking. But I've unfortunately witnessed it on a flat track outdoors where the bike goes over the fence. But and we saw that amazing ride where I think it was Kelsey Mitchell went on to a Canadian rider went on to the where you see all of the signage on the side and rode on that and back onto the track and actually didn't even crash. So that was pretty phenomenal. But to see a rider go over the track into the crowd was probably the scariest thing I've ever seen in cycling.